This episode is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Pizant Building Products. Pizant Building Products has been providing contractors and builders with the supplies necessary to complete their jobs since 1964. They have built a reputation of honest, helpful, and quality service, serving the HRM for the last 58 years, now with 7 locations in Nova Scotia and 1 in New Brunswick. Our team at Atlantic Construction Podcast is extremely excited to announce our new co-branded partner, Procore. Procore is the global leader in construction management software. We'll be conducting several podcast episodes with Procore users and construction companies across the country in 2023, among many other things. Stay tuned. We're excited. Welcome back to the Atlantic Construction Podcast. Very excited today to welcome our guest from Paradise, Newfoundland, Terry Hussey, CEO of Vigilant Atlantic. So Canada's one and only construction agency, and we'll get into exactly what that means and the structure of the company and sort of the vast service offering that Terry and the team have. But firstly, thanks for joining us, Terry. We've got a cold snap on the way here in Nova Scotia. Pretty chilly. I think they're calling for minus 35 with the wind chill here tomorrow. I'm assuming it might be a little bit colder up your way.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. We have an interesting thing that happens at Vigilant because we've got an office in Dartmouth. And so whenever we're on a meeting with a team in the Dartmouth area, they'll say they're experiencing this type of weather, and we will know it's 24 hours away from where we are. Yeah. So you were cold. You had weather yesterday, so we're having that today. It's snowy. And then you'll get cold tonight, and we'll be cold tomorrow. So it's really quite funny how consistent it is. The team in Dartmouth will say, yeah, we're experiencing, it's really nice today. And well, maybe not when it's nice, because typically in Newfoundland, we don't get the nice weather, but there's a 24-hour gap. So if it's cold there, it'll be cold here in 24 hours. So you can check back, but I'm pretty sure that's in the forecast.
That's great to hear. So Terry, we start off with just some background, some context of our guest. I know you've got a long history of, helping found Vigilant in 2012. Prior to that, some other things, and then your time at Memorial for your Bachelor of Engineering and your MBA. So maybe you could just run us through a little bit about your history and your journey in the industry.
Sure, I'd love to. It is a long story, and I'll attempt to make it a little briefer for the benefit of your listeners. But I am, a child of the 80s. So I grew up with the emergence of the personal computer in the late 80s and in the early 90s when the internet was coming around. And as a teenager in the early 90s, I was one of those people in the bedroom on the internet exploring the early days of the internet. But what it did was it got me quite good at computers. And so I became known as kind of the computer expert. And as high school came to an end and it was time to choose something to do at school, my father said, hey, you should do engineering. You're good at computers. And I said, okay. And that was the extent of my evaluation as to why I wanted to do engineering. This becomes relevant later. But I did engineering because I was good at computers. So a couple of years into the degree, you got to choose your discipline. And electrical engineering was seen as the most difficult. And so I said, all right, I'll do that one. And that was the extent of my evaluation. Didn't think about what it meant to be a civil or a mechanical or a naval architectural engineer. Electrical's the hardest. I'm going to do that. So around halfway through engineering, I realized I'm not really enjoying myself. Every work term I've had, I've walked out of there saying I'm not going to do this again. So as I went through every work term, I would just tick it off the list. Yeah, I'm not going to do that kind of work. I'm not going to do that kind of work. And then halfway through engineering, I took an elective, a business elective called organizational behavior. Now, amongst the business students, they will tell you, OB as it's known, is the most boring, notoriously boring, dry course in the faculty. People hate that course.
Organizational behavior?
Organizational behavior. It's all about teams and culture and leadership and, structuring companies. I walked in there as term 5 engineering, and the professor was like, let's talk about this thing that happened in the news. Here's this article from the internet. And we're going to have a discussion about it. And I'm sat there with my notes and I'm waiting for the professor to start writing on the chalkboard, because up until then, university to me was you sit in a chair, the professor starts writing notes and you start copying. 50 minutes later, you get up, you shake your wrist, and some point in time in the future, you hope that you can review your notes and learn it. I thought that that's what university was. Sit down in a class, write notes, learn afterwards, do your assignments, go to your labs, and that was it. Discussion in a classroom. What was that? So I loved the course. I had a great time doing it. Started to do more and more business electives.
If I may jump in there, Terry, I think it's interesting the point you just made. I mean, when you said organizational behavior and you started mentioning, what it was about, culture and all that, I thought, well, that sounds awesome to me. I mean, some people might think it doesn't, but it's just the way that some of us learn compared to others, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people can learn that way, and it's crystallized knowledge, and you're taking it in from a screen or a board and writing down notes and stuff. But then others, if they're engaged and they're experiencing something, and even another layer to that would be like working on the tools, on the trades. People that learn more hands-on. So I just find it fascinating how so many different people learn in different ways, and understand yourself and, how you can learn if you're engaged in something as opposed to what you're mentioning earlier. Yeah.
It was profoundly different, the mindset. And so I started doing more and more business electives and kind of was like, wow, this is amazing. I love this. This is so enjoyable to me. And it was interesting because you got to understand, right? This is the late 90s, the early 2000s, and engineering, and I think engineering is in terms of engineering schools, it's still brutally difficult and challenging. I do think that we've come a long way in terms of recognizing the impacts of stress and negative mental health on students, because back then, the engineering faculty took it as a point of pride to try and make people fail out or drop out. Like they would try and flush these people out of the system, and they took it as a point of pride. Like it was not healthy. And you could see it in the context in that most people coped by drinking heavily during engineering school. And that's why engineering at Memorial had a notorious reputation as a party faculty. I mean, we graduated a lot of functioning alcoholics, 23 years old, and they're basically alcoholics. And these are types of things that would not work now. They wouldn't be acceptable because we've learned how dangerous it is. But at the time, engineering was a meat grinder. Like it was designed to make you suffer. And I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, I remember I wrote 6 exams in 6 days in term 4 engineering. It was a summer semester. I was in such a fog. I got in my car in my parents' driveway, put it in reverse, backed it into a car that was parked in the driveway. I didn't even see it there. I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was there. They came out, they were like, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We've got insurance, because I think they knew if they'd made a big deal of it, I would have just had a mental breakdown, because that was that was how on the edge that students of engineering were. But as I got through the program, and one of my business elective professors said to me, have you ever thought about doing an MBA? I looked her dead in the face. I said, I can't do an MBA. I'm doing an engineering undergrad. And she kind of just laughed and said, that's how the MBA works. That they take undergrads of any discipline. If you like business, you should consider it. And I know it was just like if somebody had did that record scratch, right? And stop the music. And it was like, I didn't realize that there was an option to pursue business postgraduate after an engineering degree. I wrote the GMAT, made the decision to do it right away after school, which came with disadvantages because, of course, then I'm a heavily educated, not very experienced kind of recent graduate. Did my MBA on credit full time, racked up an enormous amount of debt doing it because it was what I wanted to do. Nobody in my life thought it was a good idea. Everybody was like, why don't you just go work as an engineer? And I was like, I hate it. I don't want to go to work as an engineer. I'll be miserable. So did my MBA, and I loved it. Every course in that program was phenomenal. I loved every bit of it. I squeezed. Go ahead.
How do you feel because I want to stay on this and explore this a little bit. I think we have lots of time. Like, I'm going to make an assumption that you're maybe a lot more extroverted than some engineers. Now, I'm not saying all. I don't want to put people in a box. But, we were talking earlier about learning in different styles. When you were engaged in the classroom instead of, data-driven stuff, it was a whole new thing for you, like loving the MBA. It's very collaborative. You're working with people. Even mental health-wise, a lot of times you're using those different left and right sides of your brain. You're drilling into calculations and all this kind of stuff. And then when you're out, you're talking to people. It's a different thing. It can be really healthy to have a good balance. What do you think about the psychology behind that? Because, just in the thread of what you were kind of just speaking about the last few minutes, for engineering students and how much of a grind it was. Um, I'm not even sure what the question is I'm trying to ask, but
I think it's a good point in that most people who meet me would say, yeah, Terry is 100% extroverted. He's this guy. He's the leader of a company. He started his own business. He could talk to
yeah.
anybody, etc.
Okay, let me jump in again because what I was going to say was I think the fact that maybe a lot of people have this idea that what it means to be an engineer, or when I graduate from university, here's what it's going to be like to be an engineer. But I think a lot of what engineers are doing, working for general contracting firms, a construction agency, they're in leadership roles, they're dealing with people and they're dealing with problems on a construction site, but it's always with people. It's always in conversations. How are you handling conflict? How are you navigating this situation? So sure, you need to know the layered knowledge of as an engineer of civil, electrical, whatever. But I guess what I was getting at is how has it served you now? And now that you're in industry as a CEO, it's far different maybe than what a lot of engineering students think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Coming out of university.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, right? I mean, like engineering in many ways, it's an inch wide and a mile deep, so to speak, right? You become so knowledgeable in a particular subject area. Like you are seen as an expert, right? You can testify in court as an expert witness, as an engineer of a particular discipline with sufficient experience. And that's a tremendously valuable body of knowledge and skill set. But what I learned in business, obviously I learned about a lot of different subjects, and the business degree I did, the master's I did, was very broad, right? You didn't specialize. You kind of got a little bit of everything, and that appealed to me. And I am, fundamentally probably an extroverted person. But then the interesting thing is that I also have an introverted side. Like I don't need to be around people to be happy. I could sit in a room by myself and read a book for 5 hours and I'm delighted, right?
And I'm like that as well. And I'm glad you said that because, we can't try and put people in the box. We're somewhere on the continuum. One day I might be a little more introverted than the next, and I don't really want to talk to anybody. That's all.
Yeah. So I think just based on my experience with work term students, I mean, we see all types in our company, but they have got, and I think it's partially a credit to the younger generation. They're a little more well-rounded. It's less common for me to get an engineering student now who is just nose down technical first. They're all fairly well-rounded, well-spoken, smart, open-minded young professionals, which really speaks to, I think, growth that society has had. The business degree has served me immensely well. But I think that my fundamental, I guess a strength or success for me is that I've always been curious about people, and I enjoy people. And I think it's what drew me to business because I did electrical engineering and I didn't enjoy it from a fulfillment perspective. But what it did give me was a phenomenal understanding of how to solve problems. And the thing about electrical that we didn't realize at the time that's now very in vogue is electrical engineering is very good at modeling things as systems. And that's become something that's very current. It's called systems thinking. And it's an approach to modeling any kind of thing as a system. And what is a business if not a system, a bunch of different systems that are comprised of people? And I think it's become something that's informed kind of my approach and my mindset as an entrepreneur, in that a business is simply a system of people. And so if the people are what's making a process or a business work, then you'd better understand how people work, what motivates them, what you need to input to these people to get the outputs you desire, because that's electrical engineering at its core. It's systems modeling, black box thinking. But you can apply that to business. And it is something that a lot of very high-end, management consulting firms and, graduate business education focuses on, is this concept of systems thinking. And it was something that happened completely by accident. I wish I could take credit as I designed it from the start, but I did electrical engineering because I was good at computers and it was the hardest. And then I didn't like it. And then I fell in love with business. And my background in electrical engineering has helped me every day of my career. It did two things, right? It taught me how to solve problems, and it taught me never to be afraid of something. Because if I can get through 6 years of electrical engineering, then I can figure this out. And that's really been valuable to me as an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship is pretty scary.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is one of the most interesting things about our team here in doing this media platform, is hearing different people's stories. And, it's so interesting that the first step of the two. Prior to the MBA, you did your electrical engineering degree, and there's a thread that draws from there to what you're doing now, and it does nothing to do necessarily with the electrical trade or design, or and it's maybe what helped you just as much or more, or combine that exponentially with an MBA, and you've got this systems thinking with dealing with people, putting together a team. I think it's a good segue into Vigilant Atlantic and your vision, obviously, with your past experience and all your education, including what you just mentioned, to create the vision for Atlantic Canada's first construction agency. And maybe we can get into that. Like, obviously, there was problems that you had a passion to solve in the industry, whether you were involved with some projects that which most people are, that did not go well. Why didn't they go well? I can't stand that this problem is here. I got to do something about it. And the thing about your service is you're kind of, it's vast. You're all the way downstream to preliminary design, cost, Class D estimates in the design phase through to B, C, and D, helping tender, and then, construction management and closeout and cost monitoring, basically everything. Now, you don't do that with every client. I'm not going to try and squeeze it all in, because you can explain, so our listeners will have a context of what it means. But I think it's really interesting to draw that thread between your unique background from electrical engineering to an MBA, and then obviously that, way back then, kind of birthed probably this 2012 spark of vigilance. So I'll let you kind of explain to our listeners the Vigilant Atlantic.
I'll go back a tiny bit before that to
Sure.
finish my MBA. I'm trying to start my career. I'm really good at computers, and I realized that the MBA straight after engineering, I come across in a certain way. Very ambitious, hard charging, energetic, but perhaps a little bit too enthusiastic. And it's intimidating to a lot of employers at the time. So I got my first job working for essentially a British company that did training for software testing. So that kind of got me into the IT sector because I had some expertise in IT. And then eventually got a job working for a fairly large IT consulting firm based here in St. John's, doing business analysis and project management, which is what kind of got me into project management. And I did that for 2.5 or 3 years. And it was a consulting company, right? And I was a good earner. I was fully billable. I was making this company a ton of money. The clients loved me. But I got to a point where there was one moment where I was on a job working for a client on behalf of my employer, and I finished my work. Like, it was 11 o'clock in the day. I was done. I've always been very fast at getting work done. My productivity has been a big strength, a big key to everything I've tried to do. And I called back to kind of home base, and I'm like, hey, I'm here at such and such. I've got all my work done. What do I do? And they're like, well, you need to sit in that chair until 5 o'clock, because they're paying us for you to be there for 8 hours, and we want that money. So you need to sit there. I'm like, yeah, but I got nothing to do. They're like, that doesn't matter. And I was just like, huh.
That's when you knew you were an entrepreneur, I'm assuming.
Not right away, but it was the beginnings of it, eh? And
yeah.
So then shortly thereafter, like, again, right, top earner, I'm making this company $250,000 a year as a consultant, really, really good at my job. The clients love me, and it's time for an annual review. And it's like, we feel like you could be more of a corporate champion. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Like, I'm one of your top earners. Like, I want a raise and a title bump. Like, I've earned it. And it kind of,
you were a threat.
I learned that my advancement at that company depended more upon how much my direct supervisor liked me personally than it did upon my performance. And that was the other kind of inspirational moment that was like, okay, maybe I need to do this on my own. And there were things about working in the industry that I didn't like, right? I didn't like that butt in a chair attitude. I didn't like that profit first mentality. I felt like the owners were essentially just treated as a mechanism to make the owners rich, right? There's times where I didn't even think the owner of the company knew my name, right? And I was making this guy $250,000 a year. Didn't know anything about me. And so I made the decision to start my own business in IT consulting. Again, no plan. Looking back on it in 2010, when I started my first company, it was madness. I had no idea what I was doing. I started my first company in February, actually February 11th. So in like 8 days, it'll be 13-year anniversary for me as an entrepreneur. My wife quit her, my then fiance quit her job to go back to school full time. And I did, and we got married that July. So that was a insane financial year for us. But started this company, I had no plan, no business plan, no clients, no idea what I was going to do. I'm like, I cannot let my life be dependent upon how much somebody else likes me. I'm going to go my own way.
Yeah.
And so we started this company, and that first year was brutal. I made 20 grand that first year as a family. Like my wife and I, we made $20,000, and we were both working the year before. So that was rough. But then that second year, I started to get a few contracts. I actually had an opportunity come up through the summer that was like 2 full-time contracts at once. And I remember looking at my wife saying, like, you're not going to see me for July and August. And she's like, look, if it's what you got to do, it's what you got to do. I'll support you how I got to do. I worked 80-hour weeks for, I think, 16 weeks straight, but I made more money in 3 months than I had in like the 2 years prior, because that was what it took to make it work. And both of the jobs were very successful. Now, I wouldn't recommend it. It was tough. But then after 2 years of being in IT, this opportunity with Vigilant came about, and I helped 2 people found a company as project managers. And originally the vision was, I know how to start a company. I can help you guys out just to get it going, and you can do project management. Very quickly, it became kind of this thing that was starting to gain momentum, and maybe we should open an office. Maybe we should hire some people. And it became my sole focus. So Vigilant was not something that was birthed out of this, well, I recognize this is a problem, we're going to start a business. It was more so like, I'm going to start this business and help you out. But then it became this freight train of momentum. Again, originally in owner's project management consulting, just in the Newfoundland market. But it was addressing a problem that existed, where a lot of times owners wouldn't be able to put the effort necessary into the planning of a job, the active management of a job. They would hire a design consultant to do detailed design, and then expect the design consultant to be project managers. And that's a different scope. Yeah. It's a different scope of work. And in our early years, as project management consulting firm, I may have been a little harsh on the design consultants because I was trying to differentiate ourselves and make ourselves stand out. Yeah. Now I think I understand, and we try to be more fair-minded, that I think it was probably unreasonable of the owners to expect design consultants to do project management work, number one, without being paid, and then number two, without being told that they're doing it, right? This is just common sense stuff. But we addressed a gap in that market and started to grow. And man, it went, we got to remember now, this is Newfoundland and Labrador after the oil boom. And so from 2014 to 2020, pre-COVID, the economic climate here was brutal. Like it wasn't up and down, it was down, heading down. And like, where's it going to stop? Nobody knows. But in that context, in that economic climate, I mean, we grew the company steadily year after year after year. We were at 17 staff in January of 2020, just before COVID hit, but we kind of hit what I'd call a structural limit in the size of the market. Our opportunities for growth were limited, and we made the decision to expand to the Maritimes in January 2020. And March 3rd and 4th of 2020, I was in Halifax. I had a week of meetings with people starting this expansion, and 2 weeks later it was COVID. So that was kind of the first chapter for us as a project management consulting firm. And then COVID is a whole other journey, which we can dig into. But is there anything I kind of missed out there that you'd like me to touch on or expand on?
No, that's a good overview for sure. I mean, I think it's interesting the point you made about, construction planning and preliminary stuff. And, a lot of our audience is in the industry professionals. For context, for anyone who's outside the industry or who's involved, but not so much on the construction end, I like to just draw that thread of what it means to have things buttoned up, to have things done correctly downstream, pre-planning, cost estimating, accurate budgeting, thorough design, having the different scopes like project management governed correctly and stuff for developers, for owners, for finance groups who, want to see things get done but don't have maybe the intuition on the construction end, and just how bad it can be for contractors and subtrades on site when a year and a half or 2 years or even more than that before, things just weren't done very vigilantly. We'll use that word.
Yeah.
I started thinking about past projects I was involved in as a contractor, whether it be private stuff with a developer who might have used a freelance designer and maybe a small CM kind of one-stop shop and for a $15 million building maybe, and just like cutting costs, but not, but are you really cutting costs? Because your building took 6 months longer to build. You had another 500,000 in change orders or $1 million. And so, obviously I'm speaking to the choir here, talking to you, but I just think that to me, that when I hear construction agency, that's kind of like, those are the things you're set up to avoid, whether you're outsourcing the project management or you can come in almost vigilant for a service at any point, really, from conception to turnover, right?
Yeah, and it's something, our service mix, our service offering, and our understanding of our value proposition has evolved steadily over time, and we've gone through different phases of what we thought we were to the market. And one of the things that that's contributed, and I won't skip ahead, but one of the things that's contributed to our evolutions have been kind of that feedback loop of understanding what we're selling, understanding how it's being received, how are things working from a business perspective, what are the clients saying. I mean, you're talking different markets now. So now we're talking, the Nova Scotia, New Brunswick PEI market in the last 18 to 24 months. It's been madness. It's a super hot, overheated market. So what are the client needs in an overheated market? Who are the buyers of construction services? And this is something that's a really distinct point. I mean, this is a construction podcast. And I think a lot of construction professionals lose sight of the fact that construction is a service industry. You cannot grow an economy with construction. Construction doesn't grow the economy. Other sectors grow the economy, and construction facilitates the growth of every other sector. It's so fundamental to the success of an economy. And we lose sight of that, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, we're going to do all this construction project. It's like, well, what is it for, right? So in the Halifax, Nova Scotia area, you've got all this population growth. Population growth will grow your economy. And construction has to service that growth across the whole spectrum. Everything these people need, from getting around to somewhere to live, to places to shop, to eat, hospitals to take care of them when they're sick, elderly care, all of this stuff comes from construction. Construction literally is the fulcrum that enables the growth of every other sector. And I think that's something that if we can understand as construction industry professionals, that'll help us understand the difference we make. Because at Vigilant, we really focus on the fact that every project that comes to us matters, right? Be it, this is a business that's expanding, and if this project goes well, we're going to accelerate their growth. Or this is a community who's building a community center, and if this project goes well, it's going to make that place nicer to live. It's going to make everybody who lives there feel better about where they live. And what an impact to have, right? Like, Absolutely. we're gonna revitalize this water and sewer project, and it's going to go really, really well. And people think, oh, it's water and sewer, big deal. It's not that glamorous. But hey, that project going as easy as it can. We're going to minimize the frustration to the people. We're going to make sure that infrastructure is ready for its next 20 or 30-year lifespan. It has an impact, and construction has a massive impact on society across all sectors. And I really think that if we can think about and talk about that more, I think people will understand and appreciate what construction brings to the table, instead of, especially from the Newfoundland context, it's often just seen as jobs. Oh, it's 1,000 jobs. It's more than that.
Yeah, each one has so much more than that, so much more depth of what it means for the economy, what it means for the culture, what it means for athletics and the music and hospitals, and there's just so many different layers to it. I love how you articulated that for how we fit autonomously into society.
If you drill down and talk to the men and women on a job site, or the people who design these buildings, and you get down to them and you say, what do you love about your job? It's actually I hate to give this away because everybody's going to steal it, but one of my favorite interview questions is asking them, what do you love about working in construction? And at their core, right, they're all these same little boys and girls who like playing with the Tonka trucks in the sandbox.
Or Lego.
They loved
or something. Yeah.
And so much of our current industry, I feel we lose sight of that because it's all about profit. How much money are we making? But at the core, all of the people who got into construction because they loved construction, they love building things. They love seeing it come together. They love seeing that structure come out of the ground. They love seeing the kids playing on the playground after it's done. That's the stuff that when they go home and, they're having a lemonade on the patio with a barbecue or something, and they're just feeling satisfied with a good week's work. That's the stuff that matters. They're not thinking about how much money they made. Nobody cares about that, right? Like that shouldn't be the focus, because that's not why any of us got into it to begin with. So I think that that's just a fundamental issue, that if we can focus on more of what is this achieving, right? Oh, it's a movie theater, big deal. Okay, but like, what does a movie theater mean to people? It's a place to go and forget about for 2 hours the stress of your life, to be entertained, to just turn it all off and watch some entertainment and watch a story that impacts you in some way. Like, everything can be tied to something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I love where you're going with that. It's it makes me think of even the reason we kind of started our platform was to have voices heard, and just the passion that's in the industry. To hear you hear of the stories of you're driving down with your uncle who works in cladding or whatever, and he's saying, yeah, I worked on that building, and every street there's a building he worked on. He's got a story. Even I think, like, there's so many protocol on site and for safety and meetings and job sites, startup meetings, and what would be wrong with having a meeting where the owners and the reps come in and you remind the workers at least once in that year-long project, or 2 years or 3 years or 6 months, hey, this is what this building's going to mean to this community. You see that building envelope you're putting up? There's a million people going to see that next year when they drive by. There's 100,000 tourists going to see it next year. There's going to be this live event going on right in this room where you're putting the floor down, and at least just kind of trigger that the psychology behind that. So you're part of something here that's going to last. I mean, some people have that in the forefront of their thinking, but I think we could be reminded of it throughout projects, right?
One of the things that I think stands us apart from I think. No, I can't say everybody, but I think it's a strength of ours is our culture and our focus on respect and compassion amongst our team. And it's something that, it's funny. I tell this story sometimes, and I don't often think of it, but I remember my first day in engineering back in 1997, going back, but they pile us all into the lecture theater, and we're all in there, and we're like, what the hell is this? This is interesting. And all of the faculty are lined along the fronts, and they're all old gray bearded men. And there's like 2 women amongst the faculty. And I remember the associate dean at the time making a statement or a joke along the lines of, and make sure when you work at the companies in your jobs that you're nice to the secretaries, because these people are very important. They can get you the best pens. And everybody in the front is like, a joke, right? And I'm thinking in the back, I'm like, who the hell are these guys? Like, and there was this culture of arrogance that was kind of attempted to be bred into engineering students that I didn't recognize at the time as what it was, but it's a form of elitism. And as I went through my career, right, I've encountered people who did, a university degree, had an arrogance or superiority because they did engineering or architecture, and somebody was just a technologist, or, so-and-so is just a tradesperson. You're just a tradesperson. What do you know? And this simmering just sense of disrespect and devaluing of somebody else's work. And the funny thing is, it's something that's just part of my values as a person, and has informed my choices as an entrepreneur, is that nobody's better than anybody else, right? Just because I did engineering doesn't mean that I'm better than the carpenter on that job site. We just made different choices, and we came from different places. And it doesn't make me better or worse than anybody else, so long as that I'm going to treat that person with respect, and I hope that they'll treat me with respect. But there's just a fundamental disconnect sometimes in construction, where there's a lot of conflict created from the perceived value of different roles.
Well, I think... Go ahead. No, please continue there.
But you see this on a lot of job sites, and tie it back to the thread of what we were just talking about, the importance of this building, this structure. What does it mean to the owner, to the community, to the society, the city that it's in? Everybody had a part to play, right? From the person who swung the hammer, who drove the backhoe, who raised the steel, who installed the sprinklers, the tradespeople who built this, to the designers who put it together, to the architects who conceived this beautiful structure using all of their talents, to the people who came up with the way to manage the schedule and keep an eye on the costs, and the people who financed the job. they all applied their own talent and expertise to create this thing, thousands of inputs from hundreds of people. And at the end result is this thing. And everybody's input had value. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. I mean, we try not to, because it's really the heart of kind of our respectful approach and fairness to everybody. But I really think it's something that should be talked about more in construction. And this is a barrier to entry for a lot of people. There's a reason why, there are less women in construction than any other sector, because that's something that's not inviting to female workers, because it's disrespectful, right? I mean, it's a troublesome trend that I think is getting better. It is, but I don't want to sit here and pretend that we've fixed it, because we haven't.
Oh yeah, no, we definitely have a long way to go. We need to get better at so many things, but I love the 30,000-foot view you just you kind of laid out there, because I see that too. I've seen that in the past. I've come at it from a different angle than you. I've grew up working on job sites, then working my way into an office, estimating, project management, on the contracting side, in blue collar, heavy labor construction. I've had great experiences working with certain architects and engineers and project managers for general contractors, and their understanding of COs and our problems and our needs and our manpower that we think we need, all that kind of stuff. And then had awful experiences too. And I think, there's the intellectual elitism probably in most, fields where you're career driven as an engineer, as an architect. You got so many different personalities. If you're in architecture, you're artistic, right-brained, constantly designing, different way of thinking. You're not going to think the same way as the person who's filtered out organically as a guy working on concrete, who's going to work like he's going to hockey practice every day. But like you said, one of the most fascinating things, and I think it makes our industry different than most, maybe not so much, there's others, but there's a hole in the ground here downtown Halifax. How 4 years later, and what happened the last 4 years, all of a sudden there's a building there. There's human beings walking in and out of it for certain activities. It took thousands of people from day one for the vision to come alive and to be financed and to be designed. And then you've got all these sub-trades working under management and whatnot to have that building turnkeyed. And there's so many levels of expertise and areas of, and we wanted to get into talking about collaboration in the industry now. You mentioned how students nowadays, maybe contemporary, like say millennials or what, Gen Z, whatever the terms are, sometimes I forget, but away from that profit first mentality into, a pound of flesh, more like energy and collaboration, how that mentality can lead to everybody needs to win at this table. The consultants are making money, the generals are making money, the subs are making money. That's a project where, geez, we look back and say, like, that really went well. A lot of things have to happen for it to go that well. Plus, the finance needs to be there. It's just fascinating. There's so many moving parts, but definitely one of the most humbling things for me in talking to somebody different almost every week, whether it's a large GC that's multinational or it's a guy who just started a cladding company 2 years ago with 30 feet on the ground. And he just got his first job over $1 million, and he's over the hill and he's making good money and he's working with his wife to start the business. Like, there's so many different people with so many different layers, and that's what it takes. And we're different, but we need each other. And if we could just have that mentality, level of respect, empathy is a big thing. The 3 different types of empathy. Just to, I can't put myself in the shoes of a structural engineer or somebody who's been an electrician for 30 years, but I'm around. I see what he's doing. Like, I gotta make it. It takes effort, right? It's assimilation and accommodation. Piaget's psychology of children and their development. If you can't assimilate something into your thinking, you got to accommodate for it, and that takes effort. But if we put that effort in, man, there's a lot of problems can be avoided. And I just love what you're getting into there, because that's what makes me love the industry. But at the same time, it's what makes me hate it at some days, because it's tough. It's tough to work with other people that are different types of people than you are.
It's not something that like we've solved, but I do think it can be really frustrating or disappointing to kind of run into it in your day to day. And you can really see the impact on people, right? Like when they're on a job where it is conflict driven, and it's just, instead of people trying to find a way to do things, they're finding reasons why they can't. And normally the reasons why they can't do something is financial. It's, oh, it's going to cost me too much money. And that can create this negative feedback cycle of conflict and disrespect that ends in disaster, where you're in court and everybody loses, right? Everybody knows a story or has been involved in a job that's ended up in litigation, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a terrible, terrible thing, but it can be prevented if you have the right collaborative mindset and you try to be fair-minded, you try to be respectful. I don't know. I'm sure I can't say it's impossible. I've learned, I'm too old now to say never or impossible. But I think it's got to be very difficult to have a construction project end in litigation if all of the parties on the job are genuinely trying to be fair-minded and respectful.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Because the jobs that end up in litigation is because somebody wasn't being fair-minded, or somebody was being disrespected, or perceived themselves to be being disrespected. And it's so easy. It's so easy to prevent. And so when we're as a project management firm or as a design engineering firm talking to our clients and our owners, we really try to educate them on the importance of being respectful and being collaborative with the people who are going to help us achieve this project, because we can't swing the hammers. We can't direct the steel, right? We're not going to drive the excavators and move the earth and do all of those things. That's not what we do. But the people who do matter, and we have to treat them fairly, or it's going to cost you more money in the long run. And that's a hard lesson for some owners, but the ones who get it, and they're the ones who get really, really good at this stuff, they have successful projects, and that just accelerates their growth. And it's a positive feedback loop in the best possible way.
Yeah, I wonder if we could just step back for a minute here and talk a little bit about vision. And when you talked about starting that first tech company, you said, I didn't know what I was doing, but I got started anyway. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, we don't know exactly what we're doing, but at least we have the courage to take that first step. When Vigilant was first established in 2012, you talked a little bit about the evolution and the growth since 2020 into Nova Scotia and other parts of Atlantic, fully across Atlantic now. I think you even do some cost stuff in Central Canada and throughout the Western provinces too, perhaps.
Yep.
But for where was I going with that? I kind of lost my train of thought.
Kind of how I got to the vision.
Yeah. Like, so when you first started Vigilant, like, was most of your contracts kind of outsourced construction management, where you would have project management professionals on staff that would say to the owner, hey, we'll take care of this. We'll look after the project. Were you doing cost estimating and monitoring and so the 4 pillars that you mentioned and prime consulting? Were you doing all that stuff at first, or was it predominantly like, we're an outsourced kind of construction management company that will take care of your project management? It
evolved it's funny, right? I look back on the past 11 years as Vigilant, and now where we are, I look at it and I say, how did we not do this to begin with? But you take for granted the experience and the benefit of that time where you learn, right? And you learn and you adapt and you move forward. And so
I think that's what I was getting. I was like, sometimes you start, you have the idea, you have the vision, you don't have it fully, but because you started, then you get this feedback, and other people in the industry and the market will almost tell you who you are, as the years go by.
Exactly. And that's a good way of putting it, is that the market kind of told us who we needed to be. We started out right up until before COVID. We were strictly a project management consulting company. Sometimes we would directly second a staff member to a large organization, but primarily we would just get a scope of work to manage a project on behalf of an owner, public or private. We would hire the designers, we would hire the construction people, the contractors, and we would manage the job to finish. And that was your typical owner's project management scope. COVID hit, and suddenly it was an absolute just whirlwind of, oh my God, how do we survive? What happens if they shut down construction? How do we deal with this? In January of 2020, we set a goal of doubling revenue for that year. And halfway through the year, we were like, what happens if we shut it down and sell everything? And as an entrepreneur, right, that's an insane whiplash to go from that. I mean, there was times where
6 months.
Partners, 6 months, it's like 3 months after COVID, where I was sat here in this chair saying, all right, if I stopped it all now and sold everything, how much money would be left for my partners and I, and how long could we survive with our families if, the world continues to go sideways? And that's a bit of a a body blow, right? But things kept going. You keep the team going. You try and encourage people. You just one day at a time. COVID happened and we had to evolve. Everything is in Zoom. What can we sell? Okay, well, project management's difficult to sell. What about costing? We have professional quantity surveyors on staff. We do cost monitoring, cost estimating for all of our existing project management clients as part of our project management scope. Why don't we start selling costing? So we started selling costing. And who do you know that outsources a great deal of cost estimating services but architecture firms? Because architecture firms are very, very talented at the vision for a building. They're artists, truthfully. Architects are artists in terms of what they come up with for a building and understanding all the technical details that go into making a building function. The form and function of a building is the domain of the architect, right? They are experts at it.
And how humanity will interact with that space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but they don't like to get into detailed cost estimates as costing professionals, because then the client gets angry with them when things don't work out with. And so
that's the old saying. The old saying. You don't mention money to you don't mention cost to an architect, right?
No offense. So we started selling cost estimating to Atlantic Canada, and then we said, well, if we can do it in if we're based in Newfoundland and we can do a cost estimate in New Brunswick, why can't we do one in Ontario? So we started selling into the Ontario market of detailed cost estimates. Massive demand, downtown core Toronto, just in absolutely out of this world demand for cost estimating. And the funny thing was
from the client of architects specifically,
primarily architects were they still are our main client for cost estimating is architects who outsource their clients' cost estimating needs to us. And massive demand in Ontario. Thing about Ontario is they love dealing with people from Atlantic Canada because they get that Atlantic Canada pricing. And then we said, hey, let's go. If we can do it in Ontario, why not Western Canada? So we started selling into British Columbia, Alberta. The demand in British Columbia is even higher than Ontario. And the British Columbia people love us because we're not from Ontario. So it's just a funny dynamic when you go nationwide. So that was costing. So we started to stand up that vertical. We started to grow it.
Can we drill into costing a little bit? Yeah. You want to keep going with what you were about to say there? Or?
Well, I was just going to show the other two services, but we can get to them. We're doing okay.
Okay,
So drill into costing.
Yeah, so when you say costing, you're talking about basically BOQ, like bill of quantities for full build. The architecture, it might have it 75% design. They're coming to you for a class D or C at that point. Can we talk a little bit about D, C, B, and A, kind of those type of things?
Cost estimating. So in a construction project, right, it's all about decisions, right? Somebody's going to spend a bunch of money to build a thing, and there's a reason for that, right? And it has to be at a certain price for them to be able to justify the debt that they need to service for their operations, for whatever it is, be it a private company that's growing for profit, a not-for-profit, or a public organization or community. It has to hit a certain price point to get them what they need. And so you have to go through a certain process, right? You have an idea, I have a need, I need X square foot of space, and I've got this much money, and it needs to do this thing. And so generally at some point, you're going to talk to somebody. It can be an architect, it can be an engineer, it can be a project manager, it doesn't really matter. And they're going to say, okay, well, what do you want? Okay. And they're going to start doing what's some very early stage kind of planning, conceptual idea of, well, roughly a building of this size at this type is going to cost this much money. A good starting point is somewhere along the way. I mean, you can do this real rough napkin kind of square foot cost. What is a rough number, right? And so if you can get to a point where you're proceeding through a conceptual design, but you haven't started detailed design, and that's a really important inflection point, right? The difference between a concept design and detailed design, where you're going to pay a design professional to go and do the design. That's a massive expense.
Like you're talking, full assemblies, finished
full
products, spec,
everything, right?
Everything, hard spec, yeah.
Issued for construction drawings and specification that a contractor can take and erect this thing out of thin. Yeah. It's literally, we're creating something off of paper. Well, computers now, but still I consider it paper blueprints. But in those early stages, before you make the decision to spend the money, because we try to represent owners. So the owner's going to go, let's say it's a $10 million structure, and they're looking at like $800,000, $1 million in design fees. Before they spend that $1 million on design, it might make sense to make sure that they can get what they want for $10 million. So the designer does a little bit of work, concept design. And at that point, you take a concept design, you hand it to a costing firm like us, and we will do a class D estimate on it, which is an elemental cost. Because, concept design is very rough, right? You got floor plans, elevations, that's pretty well it. There's not a lot of detail in there.
No.
Well, from that, you're able to do a Class D cost estimate based on the standards of professional quantity surveying and come up with a reasonable estimate of what this is going to cost based on market conditions, labor rates, supply chains, what it takes to put this building together. And us, ironically, as a project management firm, we're able to put that expertise to bear when we're building a cost estimate because we know what it takes, right? We've erected these structures. So it's not all rough numbers for us. We're able to apply our own kind of expertise and insight to our estimates, which really, really helps our accuracy. But at the end of the day, you get a cost estimate. Class D is elemental costing. It's based on, traditionally a concept design. And you give that to an owner that says this building will be, 10.5 million plus or minus 1.2 million. And so that gives them a range and allows them to say, okay, it's a little bit more than I wanted, but I feel comfortable saying, let's proceed with design. And then they start designing. And then generally, ABCD is just increasing accuracy and effort. But once they issue those 99% for review drawings or issued for construction drawings, that's when that pre-tender estimate comes in. And that's the one that's your typical kind of go, no-go decision. We're going to go out, we're going to do, Class D or Class A. Typically it's Class B because it's a little less labor intensive. A Class A estimate is a full takeoff. We're counting every nail, every board, every cubic meter of concrete.
And so usually like a Class A estimate, you're talking like that's within 5% one way or the other, hopefully.
Not much different from what a contractor would do to bid it. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's exact same kind of process. I remember growing up watching my father do takeoffs on the weekend for
I can relate
cash,
to that. Yeah, I can see.
Right. And a set of blueprints on the table. There was no eating at the table from Saturday to Sunday because you get the blueprints Friday night. You had to have the estimate done Monday morning.
Yeah.
But you would get that number. It goes to the owner. And now before they go to tender and sign contracts and go down that process with a contractor, they have some sense of what this project's going to cost. So from a business perspective of the business of doing construction projects as the buyers of construction services, it just makes sense to have these checks before you start spending lots of money.
It's a milestone. It's a checkpoint. Yeah, exactly.
No-brainer. So that's cost estimating. The other side of cost estimating that's really important for us is cost monitoring, payment certification, is that most of these projects require an owner to go out and leverage debt. So a bank will come and say, I'll lend you your $10 million. You put in your 20% or 10% or whatever it is. And they say every month that you're going to come to me looking for a progress draw from your contractor saying the job is 6% done. I want 6% of the money.
Yeah.
The bank will say, I want somebody independent to this process,
third party,
to verify it. And that's the work of a professional quantity surveyor. They go on site, they check the progress, they value the progress, and they report back to the bank, and that authorizes a progress draw on the loan, and away they go. And so we've had a lot of success with cost monitoring work. It's very difficult work, right? But it's something that's required on almost every job. If you finance a job in construction, the financial institute is going to want a cost monitor to mitigate their risks.
Yeah. So like, it's not very often that any developer is getting through a project without that cost monitoring third party. I mean, there may be some situations or, on government public tenders or whatever, but if you're a private developer, you're cost monitoring.
And it makes sense. Even if you're the largest developer and you own you're a contractor developer and you own your own engineering design team.
Sure.
Right. It's all integrated. It makes sense for you to have somebody outside of your influence to make sure that things are going right, because it'll protect you.
It's protection.
Right? It'll protect the owner
risk.
from a situation where, you know what, this is not advanced as far as you think it is, and you're exposing yourself to some risk here.
And there's got to be some protocol for, a lot of these large developers, certainly in Nova Scotia and HRM, they're integrated design teams and stuff and engineering firms. But, like, I'm sure the bank has protocol where if there's a PQS under your payroll, we need a third party. You got to prove.
They generally won't. They generally insist upon the independence. Yeah, it's something very well. So because a PQS, they are a professional, so that if they feel comfortable stamping it, they can. But it's almost universally a third party.
Yeah.
So that's the costing service that adds tremendous value. So we stood that one up. We've always kind of had this advisory practice, which is kind of our catch-all for if you need help with something that isn't a typical engagement, like, a gap that you have. You need help with this procurement. We just did a job recently for the government of Nova Scotia where they were standing up an internal design team, and they wanted someone to help them through the 10-month process of how do we create the processes to do design internally at government? How do we hire the staff and the directors and create the policies and processes to integrate with the rest of government? That's a complicated piece of work. You need some expertise. And private sector has a lot of expertise on being efficient with design. And so, example of a piece of work. So your typical kind of like management consulting engagement, you know, you've got an organization that's got a short-term need. Hey, we're overloaded. We need someone to help us with 2 months until we get somebody in place. No problem. That's kind of our advisory kind of role. And in the most recent evolution of us, and I think was the final piece of that construction agency vision for us, and it's really gained a lot of momentum in our minds since we've made the decision, was we had always resisted directly doing prime consulting engineering design work. Even though we'd been licensed to practice engineering throughout our whole existence, we've had a permit to practice civil and structural engineering. On a lot of our project management jobs, especially for repeat clients, we would help them with the civil design. It just made sense, right? We can just do it ourselves. We weren't built as a design shop because that takes a certain kind of staff, but we would do it. And then we came to the realization, mostly from our work in the Nova Scotia region, in terms of how hot that market has been, recent interest rates cooling things down notwithstanding. But we would go to these clients, and we talked earlier about listening to what the market has to say. We would go to these clients and we would say, hey, we're Vigilant, we do project management. And they would say, we do project management. And project management is one of those things, everybody thinks they can do it, right? Yeah. And project management is a complex science and art. You remember earlier talking about engineers, very introverted, maybe not so great at communication. Project managers are expert communicators. They have to be, and they have to be able to identify and relate to other people and make them feel like they are listening to them and they're being heard, so that when conflicts arise, you can work through them. That's what a project manager does, right? They don't just look at Gantt charts and monitor budgets. Project managers get people to do what they're supposed to do, and they get them to feel good about it. That's what a good project manager does.
You could sum it up, maybe. I don't know if you agree. Is a conflict. You're managing conflict. I mean, that's
100%. Massive part of the job.
Yeah.
And so we had resisted it for a long time, but the owners up there, the clients up there were saying, hey, I got a project manager. I don't need that. I got Joe. He built a shed once. He can manage this job. And I'm serious, right? Like this guy.
I know you. That's why I laughed.
This guy drove a backhoe once, so he can manage his $10 million commercial building. No problem. It's a tilt up.
He helped me build a doghouse last weekend.
Oh my God. And we're like, okay, fine. And we're like, well, what about costing? No. The bank don't care. I'm not doing none of that. Or I got a guy. All right, cool. But what they would say to us was, well, can you stamp drawings? And we would normally say, well, we could, but we don't really. And finally, a little while ago, we said, you know what, enough's enough, right? The market right now, in a hot market, they want someone to help. And we've got the ability to help. We've got a tremendous expertise, especially in civil design, infrastructure design, site layouts, that kind of stuff, where we could go and be the prime consultant on a job, even a building. No problem. We just got to sub out to sub-consultants. We know what it takes. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for all this time. And it's just we'd resisted it because we were like, are we going to get into that game? But now we've finally said, you know what, we're going to do it. It's what the market wants. It's what the buyers have been asking us to do. And so we've said we're doing it. We're fine. We are now fully offering design engineering services, prime consulting. It's primarily in civil. We can do some structural. And then we sub-consult. We build a team of consultants necessary, and we prime the job. And it's been, the response in terms of the opportunities for us has been tremendous. It's almost like I set off some dynamite, because it was kind of a final impediment in terms of the projects that we could help from. If you think about the market of construction projects as a pie, right? We were only carving out a slice.
Yeah.
The projects of the owners that recognize that they need project management help, knew that they shouldn't do it themselves, and we could find them at the right time when they were ready to do a job. That's the other variable, right? Timing is almost the key sales variable for us. Mm-hmm. But we did that, and now it's basically every project that exists, we can help. And I really feel like in my mind that the concept of the construction agency and who it is I want clients to call, and the value that we drive as this fair-minded, collaborative approach to getting projects done, and understanding the context of what it means to the business, to the client, what it means to the community, how each piece of the puzzle, from the design firms, the sub-consultants, to the GC, to the subcontractors, to the tradespeople, how they all form this puzzle. I feel that our model is uniquely positioned to really, really add value to any construction project. And it has been very exciting since we kind of made that shift to adding that, rounding out our primary services. And that's kind of what that construction agency concept is in a nutshell. It's whatever somebody needs, we can help.
Yeah, and just to give some context here and draw some threads. So, is it a lot often the case that you mentioned, yeah, you're outsourcing cost estimating from architects throughout Atlantic Canada, also Ontario, now Western provinces. For developers, you might be offering cost monitoring services throughout a project from the construction phase. So and then there's other consultancy stuff going on throughout, and so how important are repeat clients, and are there some situations where you're basically checking all the boxes of these services right from point A to Z, from preliminary right through to tendering, right through to construction and turnkey? You're turning over substantial completion. Like, does that happen
Yeah.
often? And so you want those to be repeat clients, right? Obviously, I mean.
Honestly, we have clients who have used us for years and years and years. A good example is, both the O'Neill Auto Group and Capital Auto Group in Newfoundland, where, they used us for one project just as a little piece of work. And then it became a whole other project, and then a bigger project, and then another one. And for us, that full service of somebody picks up the phone and calls us and says, hey, I need this thing. I need space. That's what it ultimately is, right? I need space because my business is growing and I want this space to serve this function, and I've got this much money. Can you help us? They call us and we can help them through that process, and in a way that's designed to help to minimize their expense until they have to spend the money, right? You want to make sure that they're getting the building that they want, the building that they need. Sometimes is more than the building that they want, but nevertheless, at the price they can afford, in the timeline that fits their need, right? It's a very complicated process. And everybody understands, it's something I always think about. Everybody understands that when you've got a legal question, you'd better call a lawyer. But sometimes people think, I've got a construction question, I don't really need to call a construction expert until I'm ready for design. A lot of times owners will call architects before they're ready to talk to the architect. And I know I have a lot of people in architecture who tell me they spend so much time backtracking with clients who haven't done any basic planning. They just say, I want to put a building up. And they're like, okay, but what about this, this, and this? They're like, I don't know. Don't you answer that question? And these aren't things that architects are supposed to be doing. And they end up taking on this extra work, and it's just not fair to them. But if you have an owner who understands, when do I need an architect? Let's set that architect up for success by having our ducks in a row. Here you go. You're the design professional that has that artistic lens, that understands how this building is going to flow. Let's give them the things they need to succeed, and then support them as they're designing the structure. And the same thing for the contractor. Let's give that contractor the information they need to build this structure and support them. Let's not set them up for failure by giving them a crappy set of tender documents. Let's set them up for success. It's the owner's job to make that happen. But if the owner doesn't know construction, how can they do that? They need somebody to help them with that. And that's fundamentally what we do. And obviously, I think we do it well.
Yeah, well, I got to draw some threads there, because you mentioned a couple things earlier. One was productivity, and how you take a lot of pride in, and that obviously, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, I mean that's a big thing. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your productivity probably comes from the ability to look at a situation and analyze it quickly and say no very rapidly, so
Yes.
your energy doesn't get pulled in a certain direction, so you can move on quickly to something else. And just as you're talking, like, as a consultant, furthermore, not just as a consultant but as a construction agency, something that's probably more unique, with a lot of different scenarios coming at you and different types of contracts and different entry points into a project. Like, you really got to understand. You mentioned about your MBA, understanding people, wanting to learn about people. Like, you really got to understand who you're talking to, what type, what's their position? Are they an architect? Are they an owner? Are they a project manager? What's their incentive? What's their motive? Do they understand the different players involved? And because if you don't have that intuition or ability to navigate these different types of people and players, you're just going to have so much time wasted on things that are never going to come to fruition. Is that kind of resonating what I'm saying there? Yeah.
100%. Both from the time you say go and you kind of start the symphony of a construction project, but then all of the stuff leading up to that, in terms of helping that business owner through that very difficult process of, what do I need? What's possible? What's it going to take? And like, one of the main reasons people will give us money, because ultimately it's a business, right? People are giving us money for some purpose, is that these are business owners that are experts in their field. They understand what it takes to make their business successful, be it they're a developer, they're a car dealer, they're a real estate firm, they're in food and service, arts and culture. It doesn't matter what it is, but they're experts in that. but they don't know how to do a construction project. And so the quicker they can get expert advice and assistance, and this doesn't have to be us, right? But they need somebody to help them. The ones that recognize that are the ones who can succeed. The ones who get in trouble are the ones who say, I can do this myself. So now you got your general manager of your facility also leading a construction project, and you can't do two of those things at once. Something's going to suffer. What ends up happening is that everything suffers, right? They're not doing their day-to-day job properly, and they're not doing the construction management, construction planning job properly because they don't know how. It's not something they're familiar with, and it just sets them up for failure. So picking up the phone and calling somebody like us or somebody else, again, right? I'm not going to sit here and say, just call us. We're the only ones in town. Get some help. You'll save yourself millions of dollars. Every dollar you spend in early stage planning, you'll save 100 times that back in construction if you don't do it, right? And they talk about, oh, it's $20,000. It's a lot of money. It's like, man, it's better than 2 million because that's what you're risking. Yeah. And our owners, especially repeat clients, once they've been through this once, they never go away. Most of our clients stay with us indefinitely as long as they're doing work.
And would you say, I mean, a lot of times that's what it takes, especially you're dealing with, you're not on the back end of the financing for construction, and until they kind of go through a situation that doesn't go well and they learn, hey,
absolutely,
I don't want that. That's when it's really going to hit home, and you kind of feel it in your bones, like, okay, I'm not going to do that again, right? And sometimes they have to just experience it before they can be talked into. Yeah. So I know that there's probably all kinds, Terry, of interesting projects that you've worked on, throughout Atlantic Canada, obviously a lot in Newfoundland from 2013 to 2020 when you were, as you grew and evolved there. One of the recent ones, and I think that's still ongoing, is the Majestic Theatre in St. John's. I'll let you, kind of give us a little bit of the spiel on that, but it's like over 100 years old. It's a historic property, renovation. Yep. It's going to be a really cool concert hall there in St. John's, Newfoundland, with I think 350 people approximately. It sounds like a really neat job to work on, but obviously must have its challenges.
It's probably our current most memorable project because it's something that's this iconic heritage structure in downtown St. John's, right across from City Hall. Everybody knows this building, right? And a lot of people from maybe my parents' generation remember it when it was, an active, club and theater. But the vision of the current ownership group is to renovate this structure and create this revitalized arts and culture scene for, theater and music and whatnot here. It's something we're so excited to be working on it, but it's such a challenging project, right? It's the existing structure needed a lot of work. There was things they wanted to change. They needed to make it accessible. Is it structurally sound? So many moving pieces that, to the owner's credit, right? The owner reached out to me before they did anything and said, can you help with this? I said, yeah, let me put you in touch with my partner, Grant. He's the guy who can help you through this. But through him and people who have worked with us as general contractors, and the contractor we've got on that job, I won't list any names, but if anybody's interested, they can reach out to me, has been excellent. Great kind of collaborative. We're all working together to make this happen. The architect who's worked on that has just done some tremendous work. Everybody's excited by the project because they see what it can mean to a city that's, economically not really doing all that great at times. And so it's something that can really have some meaning to a community. So that project's been extremely successful, exciting for us. If I'm talking about some other memorable ones, or you can expand if you want.
I definitely want to hear about the other ones. For some reason, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. What's the name of the Broadway show about the Newfoundland people in 9/11 when the plane stopped over? Is it From Away? Come From Away. So I don't know why, but for some reason it triggered a memory for me a few years back. I seen that show in Toronto. Amazing, and it just accentuated the Newfoundland people and obviously how accommodating they were of all the people on these planes, putting them up for weeks and stuff. But I don't know why I thought of that, just because the theater concept and stuff like that. It just as I talk to you and it's definitely in line with my experience with people from Newfoundland. It's just always such great personality, and that show really. It'd be cool if they ever did that show at the theater there when it opens.
Yeah. So it's an exciting project. We can't wait to see it finished. A couple of other ones just quickly that have mattered to us. The town of Mahone Bay, we did their fire hall and we finished that maybe half a year ago. But the thing that, first of all, it was just a very interesting project to work on. But the thing that really mattered to me on this was that these were the first people outside of Newfoundland that hired us as project managers. It's the first job we ever got off island.
In Nova Scotia, okay.
In Nova Scotia. and we bid it. It was an open call.
For
We
the
bid it.
municipality?
The
Yeah.
municipality did an
Yeah.
open call and they interviewed us, and we were very transparent in our bid. We said, look, we're based in Newfoundland, but we've got the ability to service this. Here's our plan. Here's what it'll cost. And they took a chance on us. I mean, ultimately they did. They took a chance on us because, we're this Newfoundland based company who'd never done work in Nova Scotia before. But the officials there have been just wonderful, so professional and kind. The chief there has been great. It's just been a fantastic project. And Mahone Bay is such a beautiful community. And it's one of those things, it's one of those
It
iconic
is.
Nova
It really
Scotia
is.
communities in
Yeah.
general. It's been just a pleasure to work on. So we're very proud of that project. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just a little fire hall. But you know what? That matters to a small town. And it's something we take pride in, being a part of something, because sometimes the small projects have big impact.
Yeah.
A few others, two major car dealerships that we finished here. One that I mentioned earlier, O'Neill Auto Group. So they do the Nissan. So they did multiple projects with us from 2014 on, and it culminated in their flagship dealership here in Mount Pearl. And seeing that relationship culminate in this capstone project was a great pleasure. So that picture's on our website. And then more recently than that was the Hyundai St. John's. This is Capital Auto Group. This is the largest Hyundai dealership in Canada. It is an amazing state-of-the-art facility. Every time I walk into that, I think this is the coolest building in St. John's. Just a tremendously exciting, technically advanced building. Just so cool to be a part of that project. And it was enormous. From a commercial construction perspective, this is as big as it gets.
For a dealership.
And then
right.
the last one I'd mention, which is kind of a different one, but in the city of Mount Pearl, we did a major water and sewer project, but we did it with the design build methodology. We pitched the city engineer there. Let's do a design build water and sewer project. It had never been done in Newfoundland and Labrador before. And he said, you know what, let's do it. And we did two of them side by side, a bid build design and a design build project, same size and scope, large projects. And we did this one design build, and the contractor, to their credit, they were like, this is different. Design build infrastructure project. But you know what? They were like, let's do it. They went and got the civil firm to partner with them. And it was a huge success. And it was such a cool thing to work on, like trying something new. It was a year faster than the traditional model in terms of getting that infrastructure into the ground. Costs were consistent, but that schedule advantage was enormous. So that's a project we're really proud of. And so any of your listeners who are from municipalities dealing with infrastructure projects, there are times where a design build project can be an enormous benefit for infrastructure projects. So that was something that we were really proud of, because it was one of those things where we got a chance to innovate, and it's not always something you get to do.
Yeah, and then one of the great things about construction is just the variety and the different sorts of buildings and projects that you work on. Obviously, the 4 or 5 that you just mentioned, very lots of variety there. So many different projects there. Terry, this has been amazing. It's awesome to be close range to your passion for the industry, and chatting with you has been a real pleasure. Loved hearing about your journey. Vigilant Atlantic. Everybody, anyone who hasn't heard of them, check them out. It's amazing to hear how the company came to life and all the great things that you folks have been doing. And we just really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be a guest on your show. I think it's a great thing you folks are doing. I think that there's great things happening in construction, and sometimes we forget about how cool it is to be a part of it. And I think that just being open and honest about that, sometimes it's just cool to build these things and to be a part of these diverse teams that can do these amazing things. Sometimes we get caught up in all the negativity of trying to make money and trying to survive and profit, when I think the fun of those kids with the Tonka trucks is something we need to be remembering more often, why we're at this to begin with.
Yeah, and it's awesome to hear a CEO like yourself and an accomplished entrepreneur, talk about the importance of collaboration and where the industry's headed in that regard, and have that incentive. So again, thanks a lot. And cheers, Terry. We'll look forward to having this episode drop. And it's been a real treat. This episode is brought to you by Cook Insurance, your trusted insurance broker in Atlantic Canada for 50 years. Insurance is complex, and the Cook team focuses on delivering comprehensive solutions for your construction needs, including builder's risk, wrap-up liability, performance bonds, and project-specific construction. A Navicord partner since 2020, Cook is one of the largest construction brokers in Canada and offers national strength with a local touch. Whatever your insurance needs are, Cook has you covered. We would like to take this time to thank a longtime sponsor of our media platform, FCA Surety. The brokers at FCA Surety are experts in all surety bonding categories and provide unparalleled service during the bonding process.